Hello, my YouTube family, and welcome back to Crime Whispers. I know many of you enjoy listening to these stories as you drift off to sleep. So, before we begin, let's do something fun. Leave a comment and tell me where in the world you're listening from, and if you're enjoying these cases, don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow. Right, let's get comfy, relax, and begin story 1 tonight. We'll explore a heartbreaking case from the Philippines that shocked all of Southeast Asia back in 2021. On December 10th, 2021, the Magid couple were getting ready to leave for work when they suddenly heard their adopted daughter, Janice, call out to them, "Mom, Dad." Those simple words deeply moved them since adopting her a few months earlier. Janice had never called them that before. Their hearts were full. They felt their love had finally been accepted and returned, but this moment of joy would last only a few hours, because tragedy was about to strike their family at 2:48 p.m. Janice sent a message to their family chat group, saying that 3 burglars had broken into their house. She also posted a desperate plea for help on social media. By 3 p.m., one of Cruz Magid's colleagues rushed into his office and said, "I think your house has been broken into. You should go right away." Panic set in. Cruz grabbed his things and drove home as fast as he could. All he knew was that his 3 children were inside when he arrived about 15 minutes later. He realized he had left his keys at work. The front door was locked tight. He pounded on it, calling out his children's names, but there was no reply, fearing the intruders might still be inside. Cruz ran to the back of the house. Thankfully, the back door was unlocked. He stepped in quietly, terrified of what he might find. The house was eerily silent. Then a sharp, nauseating smell of blood hit him. The living room was in chaos. Shards of a broken vase lay scattered across the floor, and the carpet was drenched in blood. There, lying motionless, were his children. His 16-year-old son, Louis, lay near the front door, his hands tied, his mouth stuffed, his body covered in stab wounds and blood. His 18-year-old daughter, Gwen, was near the bedroom door in an even more horrific state. Her body was covered in wounds, especially on her face, which was unrecognizable. One of her ears had even been cut off. Later reports would show defensive wounds all over her arms and hands, proof she fought for her life until the very end. Cruz collapsed to his knees, sobbing, but then he remembered Janice, their adopted daughter. He had to find her. He sprinted to her room, calling her name, praying she was still alive. Her door was locked. She wasn't answering her phone. Then suddenly the door opened. Janice ran toward him, crying, her clothes soaking wet. For a moment, Cruz feared it was blood, but she wasn't injured. Between shaky breaths, Janice said 3 men had broken in. She was so scared that she hid under the bed. She heard Gwen and Louis screaming, but didn't dare come out. When the house finally went quiet, she said she didn't know what to do, so she took a shower. Cruz found this strange, but thinking she was in shock, he didn't press her. He comforted her, then called the police and his wife Lila, who was still at work. The news spread quickly through their small town, where everyone knew each other. The Magid family were known for their kindness. Cruz was a high school teacher, and Lila an elementary school principal, though their salaries weren't huge. They lived comfortably thanks to inherited farmland and a piggery from their grandparents. Their eldest, Gwen, born in 2003, was bright, outgoing, and studying in a pre-med program to become a doctor. Their youngest, Louis, born in 2005, loved books, art, and playing guitar. At only 16, he dreamed of becoming a lawyer. The Magids were a family full of love and harmony. Gwen and Louis often joined their parents in weekend charity work, visiting nursing homes, orphanages, and donating to those in need as teachers. Cruz and Lila often helped struggling students as well, and it was through this generous nature that they first met Janice. It was through this kindness that the Magid family first met Janice in early 2021. That year, they were invited to a party. While there, Gwen noticed a quiet housemaid around her own age. Curious, she introduced herself, and learned the girl's name was Janice. She was just a year younger than Gwen, and despite being shy at first, the two quickly became close, bonding over shared interests till Gwen couldn't help wondering why a 17-year-old was working as a maid instead of going to school when she gently asked. Janice opened up with a heartbreaking story. She explained that she had no memory of her life before the age of 8. All she could recall was being left alone on a large ship, as though someone had simply abandoned her there. A kind stranger had taken her photo and posted it online in the hope of finding her parents. But no one came forward eventually. She was placed in an orphanage, where she lived for 8 years. At 16, a couple hired her as a maid, promising her a regular salary. The work was hard, but she was thankful. At least it gave her a place to belong. Hearing this, Gwen was deeply moved. She began inviting Janice to meet her friends and spend time with her family before long. They were inseparable after 6 months. Gwen and her younger brother Louis felt their bond with Janice had grown beyond friendship. They came up with an idea to ask their parents to adopt. Her kind-hearted Gwen wanted Janice to have the same chance at a good education and a bright future that she herself had. First, the Magid couple were hesitant since Janice was already 17. They worried about how to guide her and feared that a sudden change might leave her feeling out of place or emotionally hurt. They discussed it many times, their concerns all rooted in wanting what was best for her, but Gwen persisted, and eventually, her parents agreed. They decided to adopt Janice and give her the chance at the future she deserved. In July 2021, Janice officially moved in and even took the family's last name. Louis gave up his bedroom for her and started sleeping on the living room sofa to welcome their newest family member. The Magids planned a small family vacation. They laughed together, took countless photos, and for a while, everything felt perfect. Still, the change required adjustments on both sides. Janice had to learn the Magid family's rules, and the others had to learn to be patient and understanding with her. Then, just a few months later, during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, an unsettling incident shook that fragile balance. Gwen was busy preparing college applications while also tutoring Janice. Meanwhile, their grandparents had caught COVID and needed to quarantine. So the family set aside some money for their food, and St. Cruz had just sold some piglets and saved about $200 in a small piggy bank for emergencies. But when he went to use it, the money was gone. The whole family was baffled. They even wondered if a thief had broken in, though nothing else was missing and someone was always home as they searched. They picked up Janice's school bag, since classes had moved online. She rarely used it, yet it felt strangely heavy inside a hidden compartment at the bottom. They found the missing money at that moment. The Maggots didn't feel anger, only sadness. They looked to Janice for an explanation, crying. She admitted she had taken it and whispered, "I'm so sorry. I don't know why I did it." She feared they would hate her or send her away, but instead, they tried to understand. They believed her behavior came from years of lacking love and security, from the constant fear of not knowing where her next meal might come from. So, they reminded her she was part of their family now, and she would never have to worry about money again. However, all of that love and forgiveness would be shattered just a few months later, on December 10th. The unimaginable happened as police swarmed their blood-soaked home. They questioned the only surviving witness, Janice. She claimed that she and Gwen were in their room while Louis sat in the living room. Suddenly, they heard him scream, followed by the sound of things shattering. When they ran out, 3 strangers had appeared. 2 were beating Louis with a hammer and a baseball bat, while the third stabbed him. Janice said that as soon as the men spotted them, they lunged. They grabbed Gwen, and Janice used the chaos to run back to the bedroom and hide under the bed. From there, she sent a message to the family group chat and posted a plea for help on social media. She claimed that, although the men eventually came into the bedroom searching for her, they somehow didn't see her hiding. But this story didn't sit right with investigators. There were several puzzling details. The front door had been locked from the inside, with no signs of forced entry. Nothing in the house had been stolen from the doorway of Janice's room. Her bed was clearly visible. It seemed unlikely the intruders would have missed her if they had actually searched the room. By December 13th, when the autopsy results came back, the mystery only deepened. Both victims had died from massive blood loss, but only after enduring vicious beatings. Gwen had been slashed in the face until she was unrecognizable, something experts said often comes from hatred or jealousy, not robbery. Lewis had been stabbed 51 times. This had been a robbery. Why such overwhelming brutality against two teenagers? Even more chilling, forensics showed Gwen was killed before Lewis, contradicting Janice's story, and both siblings had died around 2 p.m. Yet Janice's messages for help weren't sent until 2:48 p.m. In a situation as terrifying as she described, why would her distress messages seem so strangely calm? Despite the tragic incident, one detail about Janice's behavior stood out as unusual. When she sent out her plea for help, she had still remembered to add emojis to her message. A strange thing to do during such a life or death situation. Even more puzzling was the presence of the murder weapons. The hammer and baseball bat used in the killings were not brought in by strangers. They belonged to the Magid family. The hammer was Cruz's, usually stored in a drawer in the laundry room, and only he, Gwen, and Janice knew where it was kept. The baseball bat belonged to Lewis, normally kept on the top bunk in the bedroom that had become Janice's room. Typically, burglars who break into homes bring their own weapons or use easily accessible objects they find on site. But these two items were hidden away, not something an outsider could easily locate during a first visit right after the incident. Janice posted a memorial for Gwen and Lewis on social media, which quickly drew widespread sympathy. But shocking revelations soon followed. Investigators discovered that Janice had lied about being an orphan. In fact, she had been in contact with her biological mother through social media for years. Long ago, after her parents divorced, her father had left their 5 children in their mother's care, facing poverty. Her mother had been forced to let the children fend for themselves when Janice was placed in an orphanage. Her birth mother knew about it and had been aware when she was later adopted by the Magid family. This revelation quickly reached the Magids. The police, however, urged the public not to jump to conclusions or spread malicious rumors, especially since Janice was still under 18 at the time. As the investigation deepened, police made another disturbing discovery: a bag of blood-soaked women's clothes hidden in a drainage stream behind the Magid house. Tests confirmed that the blood on the clothing belonged to Gwen and Lewis, while the clothes themselves belonged to Janice. The final breakthrough came from Leela, Gwen and Lewis's mother, crushed by grief. She tried to cope by meticulously cleaning the entire house while cleaning Janice's room. She discovered a strange ID card belonging to a 17-year-old boy named Marlon, although Lila had never seen him. Several neighbors had multiple witnesses reported seeing Marlon heading toward the Magid house on the day of the murders. A local shop owner even confirmed that Marlon had entered his store and asked which house belonged to the Magids, and a motorcycle driver said he had given Marlon a ride. There, faced with this crucial evidence, the police brought Janice in for further questioning under pressure, and in the presence of a lawyer, Janice admitted she knew Marlon. She had met him while working at a church. She then confessed that she and Marlon were responsible for killing Gwen and Lewis. Police immediately arrested both of them and found Gwen's phone in Marlon's backpack still. The motive was unclear when questioned. Marlon claimed that on the day of the murders, he saw Janice's dramatic plea for help on social media. He said he tried calling her, but when the call connected, there was only silence before he hung up. Thinking it might be a joke, this explanation struck investigators as strange. It seemed unthinkable that someone would see such a message from his girlfriend and not be alarmed, unless he was either extremely desensitized or already knew what had happened. Eventually, Janice admitted the truth. She had always been jealous of Gwen. Gwen was brilliant, beautiful, and adored by everyone, while Janice felt she had nothing on the morning of the murders. After Janice called the maggots Mom and Dad, she may have decided she wanted to become their only child and monopolize their love police. Also, uncovered chilling messages on Janice's phone that she had sent to Marlon after her adoption, stating that she wanted to kill 7 people, though she didn't name who those 7 were. On December 16, 2021, Janice and Marlon were both placed in a juvenile detention center, and the case entered a lengthy trial. During this time, the Maggot family held a funeral for their 2 beloved children unexpectedly. Janice's birth mother appeared at the funeral, kneeling before the Maggots and tearfully apologizing for her daughter's actions. By May 2022, the court delivered its verdict. Janice was sentenced to 32 years in prison for premeditated murder, while Marlon received 29 years. Neither would be eligible for parole, however. Since both were minors at the time of the crime, they would only begin serving their full sentences once they turned 21. This ruling outraged the Maggot family, and much of the Filipino public. Leila had once considered forgiving Janice because of her religious beliefs, but during detention, Janice showed no remorse or regret. Many people believed that the negligence of Janice's birth parents and the failures of social welfare agencies had shaped her into a monster, ultimately leading to the destruction of the Maggot family after the deaths of Gwen and Lewis. The Magwood family began visiting their children's graves regularly, especially on holidays and anniversaries. In time, Lala returned to her work as a trying to regain some normalcy. In August 2022, Cruz opened a small restaurant that served Gwen and Lewis's favorite dishes as a heartfelt tribute to their memory story. To this next case took place on the southwest side of Hong Kong Island, on a small yet densely populated place called Aberdeen. Despite covering just half a square mile, it is home to about 90,000 people. The central figure in this story is a 25-year-old woman named Yu, who worked as an accountant. She was known to be sociable, charming, and had many friends once. She even had her romantic fortune read online, which predicted a bright future in love, but another fortune master later warned her to be careful if she wasn't cautious. Her relationships could bring her great misfortune, even death. Sadly, this chilling prophecy would eventually come true. Discovery of the body. Let's go back to the morning of October 27, 2010. It was a clear Wednesday morning around 8:30 a.m. Several fishermen were casting their lines along the coast of Aberdeen. The sun glimmered on the water, and the sea breeze was calm. But near a trash dump along Linan Road, they noticed something strange floating near the shore. Curious, they set down their rods and approached. What they saw left them stunned. A partially clothed woman's body drifting in the water. Regaining their composure, they immediately called the police. Officers soon arrived, retrieved the body, and brought it to shore. Victim appeared to be about 25 years old, 5'3" inches tall, and was found face down, wearing only a gray top and nothing from the waist down. There were minor injuries on her hands and neck, possibly from colliding with rocks while floating that evening. News outlets reported the discovery, and by the next day, several people came forward to identify her. Identifying the victim was confirmed to be 25-year-old Yu. The day before, her co-workers had called her parents, concerned because she hadn't shown up at work. Her parents said she hadn't come home that night, though she had phoned them earlier in the day. They tried calling her repeatedly without success that night. They were horrified to see the news broadcast showing their daughter's body, because Yu had only recently died. Her face was only slightly swollen, and she had a smallpox vaccination scar on her arm, which helped her parents identify her. Yu's background. Yu was born in 1985 in China. When she was 12, she moved to Hong Kong with her family. She was the eldest of 5 siblings, and the entire family lived together in Kwai Chung. She graduated from the Hong Kong Institute of Vocational Education with a degree in tourism over the next 3 years. She switched jobs several times and was working as an accountant in Shaokaiwan at the time of her death. Though she was considering changing jobs, Yu was known for her beauty and charisma. Many men were drawn to her, but her relationships were often brief, mostly involving colleagues, according to her close friend Jenny. Yu stood out wherever she went. She had a strong desire to marry a foreigner and move abroad, so she often visited Lan Kwai Fong, a lively nightlife area, looking for potential partners. The German boyfriend. In February 2010, Yu met a German colleague named Thomas. They quickly became a couple, and within 2 months, she introduced him to her parents and even declared her love for him on social media in German. Thomas promised he would take her to live with him in Germany, but later, Thomas was transferred to Beijing for work, and their relationship ended heartbroken. Yu's dreams of living overseas collapsed, desperate and devastated. She sought out a fortune teller. Fortune master told her she had strong romantic luck, but warned her to remain virtuous and cautious, or she could lose everything, or even die. This warning deeply affected her changes in her lifestyle before. Yu often went out drinking with male friends until late and let them escort her home after the fortune teller's warning. She changed her habits. She still went out to bars, but started drinking alone and taking taxis home. Unfortunately, this wasn't enough to protect her. The night before, on the afternoon of October 26th, after finishing work, Yu came home as usual and spent time chatting online with friends. Suddenly, she stopped mid-conversation, grabbed her things, and hurried out later. She called her parents to say she was meeting friends for drinks at Lan Kwai Fong, and told them not to worry. They had no idea that the next time they would see her would be as a lifeless body. Early clues and suspects. Parents provided the police with important details. Although she had broken up with Thomas in July, he had returned to Hong Kong recently, and they had rekindled their relationship briefly before he went back to Beijing. They still occasionally called each other. This made suicide unlikely. She still held hopes of a future with him. And other strange clue. When Yu left home, she was wearing tight jeans and a loose top when her body was found. The jeans were missing. Usually, a loose top would come off more easily in the water, not tight jeans. Also, geographically, her home in Kwai Chung was north of Lan Kwai Fong, but her body was found in Aberdeen, which is about 6 miles to the south, by car, raising suspicion that her body had been moved. Jenny also mentioned an ex-boyfriend named Phi, who worked as a convenience store manager. Questioning the ex during the investigation, Phi told police he had worked night shifts on October 25th and 26th. This meant he wasn't home those nights, which actually made him a stronger suspect. His current girlfriend also said he had been acting strangely, almost as if he was losing his mind. The police brought Phi in for questioning. He admitted he still had lingering feelings for Yu. Phone records revealed that he had arranged to meet her on the nights of October 25th and 26th. On the first night, Yu didn't show up on the second night. He also didn't see her, so he left after Phi was ruled out as a suspect. The police shifted their focus to Yu's German boyfriend. Thomas Yu's parents had told investigators that she and Thomas had once broken up during the 2010 World Cup. After that, Thomas returned to Hong Kong, and they rekindled their relationship. But when the World Cup ended in August, Thomas was transferred back to Beijing for work, leaving Yu behind in Hong Kong. Even after his departure, Yu continued to miss him, deeply, spending a lot of money on long-distance phone calls, and even saving up in hopes of visiting him in Beijing. However, on the day of the crime, Thomas was not in Hong Kong, so he could not have been the perpetrator. The police then searched Yu's home, collecting personal belongings, including her computer, over the next 2 days. They interviewed nearly 50 people, mostly men who knew her. One of them, a restaurant worker who had once worked alongside Yu, was shocked and saddened to hear of her death. He admitted that during their time together, he had developed feelings for her, but his attempts to pursue her were unsuccessful. He described Yu Yu as cheerful and friendly, someone who was well liked by everyone at the restaurant 3 days after the discovery of her body. The forensic report was released. It revealed that Yu Yu's limbs were stiff. There was froth around her mouth, and her lungs were swollen and filled with water. She had still been breathing when she was submerged. Tiny blood spots on her eyelids showed she had been strangled while still alive. This meant her heart was still beating when she was thrown into the sea, and that she had drowned. Her time of death was estimated to be between 7 a.m. and 8 a.m., about an hour before the fishermen found her. Police deployed a search team along the Aberdeen coastline to look for Yu Yu's missing belongings, but nothing was recovered. This suggested she had likely been murdered elsewhere, and her body dumped into the sea. Among the 50 people interviewed, one man especially drew the police's attention. 43-year-old Wen Kang. He stood about 5 feet 10 and had a muscular build. Wen had once passed the police academy entrance exam and worked as a patrol officer. Everyone thought his life was set, but in his 7th year on the force, he was accused of trying to assault a colleague's girlfriend. Another source claimed he had been arrested for taking nude photos to blackmail someone. Whatever the exact reason, Wen was dismissed from the force and served 10 months in prison after his release. His criminal record made it hard to find stable work, so he turned to driving a taxi. At that time, taxi drivers in Hong Kong could earn about 10,000 HKD a month, roughly $1,300. But when wasn't satisfied, he was twice fined for driving while his license was suspended, and eventually he started offering informal ride-hailing services to make more money. Yu became one of his regular passengers. Police suspected Wen because the last call Yu Yu made was to him between October 26th and 28th. He had called and texted her 4 times, reviewing surveillance footage near the trash dump on Lin Nan Road. Investigators spotted a taxi in the area and traced its license plate. It belonged to Wen Kang. Police summoned him for questioning. Wen appeared distraught, even crying, as he said he hadn't been able to reach Yu Yu for days and was worried about her. He claimed he never imagined he would never see her again. When asked where he had been on the night of October 26th, Wen said he was picking up passengers near Hong Kong Island. However, this only deepened police suspicion, as Hong Kong Island and Aberdeen are on opposite sides of a strait, making it entirely possible he could have committed the crime and then returned. Realizing he may have misspoken, Wen then changed his story, claiming Yu Yu had called him that night to say she didn't need a ride, but this contradiction only made him seem more suspicious. A search of Wen's taxi uncovered bloodstains inside the vehicle. Wen brushed this off, suggesting that one of his many daily passengers, perhaps a woman on her period, might have left the stain accidentally. Police also found a piece of fabric in his trunk that seemed to match the coat Yu Yu had been wearing since the coat was missing. They couldn't confirm it on the spot. Investigators learned that earlier in October, Yu Yu had gone shopping with a friend. The friend liked a particular coat, but couldn't find her size, so Yu Yu bought it instead. Police tracked down the manufacturer and obtained an identical coat for testing. The fibers on that coat matched the fibers found in Wen's taxi trunk. DNA analysis confirmed the blood in the taxi belonged to Yu, combined with the surveillance footage from the Lin Nan Road dump site. Police now had enough evidence to arrest Wen Kang 5 days after the murder. They located him at a tea house in Kowloon. He was hooded, handcuffed, and escorted to the station. Confronted with overwhelming evidence, Wen finally broke down and confessed, revealing the full story. It turned out that, despite their 18-year age gap, Wen and Yu Yu had once been romantically involved. They had met in November 2009. That night, Yu Yu had been out drinking in Lan Kwai Fong. As usual, she took a taxi home, and by chance, her driver was Wen Kang. Yu got into the passenger seat. She was dressed provocatively, wearing strong perfume mixed with the scent of alcohol. Wen couldn't take his eyes off her. Her beauty and alluring figure captivated him, being naturally open and friendly. Yu Yu started chatting with him right away. She mentioned that she often went out drinking late in Lan Kwai Fong and usually needed a taxi home in the early morning. Hearing this, when offered to become her regular driver, to his surprise, Yu agreed and gave him her contact information. Over the next 3 months, he became her personal driver, and they grew close. Their relationship gradually turned intimate. Yu jokingly asked if he could give her a discount on fares, and one immediately agreed. By February 2010, they were no longer just a driver and passenger. They were dating. When said he had fallen in love with her at first sight. He drove her to work for free, paid for their meals, and occasionally bought her gifts. Even though he wasn't well off, he was willing to spend what little he had on her. Yu had been in a relationship with Wen Jen Kong, a taxi driver with limited finances and a small social circle. When he ran out of money, he often borrowed from friends just to support her. Around the same time, in February, Yu also met a German man named Thomas and began dating him as well. Evan, after discovering that Yu had another boyfriend, Wen still held on to hope that she might choose him over Thomas. He was aware he could never match Thomas's wealth, but his feelings for her blinded him to the reality of their situation. By July, during the World Cup, Yu asked Wen to lend her 10,000 Hong Kong dollars to buy household items. He agreed immediately, seeing it as a chance to grow closer to her. He even proposed having weekly heart-to-heart talks, and to his surprise, Yu agreed, overjoyed. He transferred the money to her account. From then on, their secret relationship became more intimate. They met weekly at secluded locations like Repulse Bay, calling their secret meetings mailbox. After each encounter, Yu would often receive 500 to 1,000 Hong Kong dollars from Wen. Over the next 3 months, Yu repeatedly asked Wen for money, and he gave it willingly, believing she might eventually leave Thomas for him. But Yu had other plans. She was secretly saving money to move to Germany with Thomas. On October 26th, Yu invited Wen for another secret meeting. After picking her up from Lan Kwai Fong, Wen drove to a deserted cemetery near Tu Hong Suan. They began their usual intimate activities, but were startled when a car passed by. They quickly stopped and sat talking, still half-dressed during their conversation. Yu happily mentioned that Thomas would be returning to Hong Kong on November 1st, and spoke excitedly about her future with him. Already irritated by the interruption earlier, Wen felt a surge of frustration and jealousy. Then Yu told him something that shattered him. This would be their last time together. She explained that she didn't want Thomas to find out about their affair. However, she still had some bank debt and asked Wen to give her 10,000 Hong Kong dollars as a breakup fee. Wen was furious. He shouted, "I've treated you so well. I'm deep in debt because of you, and this is how you repay me." An argument broke out in the car, quickly turning physical. While both were undressed, Yu suddenly elbowed Wen hard in the groin. Overcome by pain and rage, he lost control in a fit of anger. Wen assaulted her, and then strangled Yu for 2 minutes, until she stopped moving, believing he had killed her. He panicked. He threw her jeans, underwear, and blue canvas shoes into nearby bushes, placed her unconscious body in his trunk, and drove off at around 9 p.m. He arrived near a trash dump on Lynn Road in Aberdeen, but had to wait until 2:30 a.m. because people were still nearby fishing and filming. When the area was finally deserted, he dumped Yu's body into the sea. That she was actually still alive at that moment. Evidence later suggested that Yu had regained consciousness and struggled for several hours in the water trying to cover his tracks. Wen used his former experience as a patrol officer to mislead investigators. He called and texted Yu repeatedly, pretending to look for her and creating a false alibi. He even walked police through the area later, showing them where he had thrown her body and her light blue handbag into the sea just 100 meters from where her clothes had been found. Police questioned why he chose to dispose of her body 27 kilometers from the cemetery where the crime occurred. When explained, he was panicked and acting on instinct. And because he had worked at the Hong Kong Marine Police headquarters, he was familiar with the area and knew how marine cases were handled. On November 2nd, guided by Wen, police recovered Yu's clothes From the bushes, the reconstruction took 3 more horseshoes. Parents were devastated when they learned the taxi driver, who had comforted them after her disappearance, was her killer the day after the murder. Wen had even called them, introduced himself as a friend of you, and driven them to the morgue to identify her body. They had once felt grateful to him, only to later be horrified that they had sat in the car of their daughter's Calirius. Parents described her as a loving and responsible daughter who cared deeply for her younger siblings. Her younger sister quietly wept while packing away her belongings on November 3rd, the same day you was buried. The Hong Kong Public Prosecutor's Office formally charged Wen Jiankong 6 months later, in April 2012. His trial took place at the Hong Kong East Magistrates Court. When he learned during the trial that you had still been alive when he threw her into the sea, Wen broke down crying in court, saying it was the greatest regret of his life. He did not plead guilty to murder, only to manslaughter. The prosecutor firmly argued that Wen Jiankong had not acted in a sudden fit of rage, but with full awareness and intent. They insisted he knew you was still alive when he threw her into the sea. Wen Jiankong, however, vehemently denied this, claiming he truly believed you was already dead, saying that if he had known she was still breathing, he would never have done it. Wen Jiankong's defense lawyer emphasized that he had repeatedly lent money to you, and that they had a long history of financial dealings. Despite you having a boyfriend, she continued to maintain an ambiguous relationship with Wen Jiankong, which, the defense argued, made her partly responsible for what transpired. But in the end, only the two of them knew the full truth about that night, and, with you gone, her side of the story would never be heard. After an 8-day trial, the jury unanimously found Wen Jiankong guilty of murder and sentenced him to life imprisonment. Nearly 3 years after the crime, his fate was sealed, and he would now spend the rest of his life behind bars. Many people doubted Wen Jiankong's testimony from the start. You could no longer speak for herself, and Wen's past reputation further discredited his claims. He had previously been dismissed from the police force for misconduct, including attempting to exploit or blackmail others with explicit photos, leaving him widely despised after killing you. He pretended to be concerned, calling her parents while secretly disposing of her body and trying to fabricate an alibi. These actions painted him as deceitful and cold-blooded. Rumors even circulated that Wen Jiankong often picked up intoxicated women in the Lan Kwai Fong area, taking advantage of them once they were alone in his taxi. Wen Jiankong was far from the innocent man he portrayed himself to be. It took less than a week from the discovery of Yu's body to the capture of her killer. The swift and efficient investigation by the Hong Kong police was widely praised by the public. Later, the senior inspector, who led the case, said the court's verdict reflected the truth and validated the police's efforts. He believed anyone could see that Wen Jiankong's testimony lacked credibility. Yu's case ended in tragedy, leaving her family shattered and serving as a grim lesson for others. Wen Jiankong must now live out the rest of his days behind prison bars, tormented by the weight of his crime. As for you, a young woman with dreams of a better future, her life was cut short by her own mistakes and by the man who took advantage of them. Perhaps if she had been content with what she had, cherished the people who loved her, and resisted the lure of wealth and status, this tragedy could have been avoided. This story serves as a warning to young women who might be tempted to trade their dignity for luxury. True happiness does not come from riches or fame, but from sincere love and wise choices. The U case has left behind a deep scar, carrying both pain and a lasting lesson for us all. Story 3. What could be more devastating than watching your loved ones die one by one from illness or accidents? Perhaps it is even more heart-wrenching and enraging when they are murdered without reason by someone who hides in the shadows, using cunning tactics. The pain intensifies, knowing the killer may still be at large. For the victims' families, anger and the thirst for justice become their only fuel to keep going. They not only seek answers, but demand that the perpetrator pay for their crimes so that justice can be served and their departed loved ones can finally rest in peace. Every clue, every piece of evidence, no matter how small, becomes a fragile hope in this long and exhausting pursuit. But things are never so simple. Tode's case is a harrowing one, the massacre of an entire family, where 3 lives were taken in a single night, leaving behind a man who witnessed the loss of his wife and 2 young daughters. Was the perpetrator someone with a deep grudge against the family, or a thief who chose them at random? Some even believe the killer was a psychopath who took 3 innocent lives simply to make their mark. The truth behind this tragedy awaits your discovery on April 20th, 2006, in Linyi County, Henan Province, China. A chilling murder case took place. A mother and her 2 daughters were found dead from asphyxiation. The horrific scene was discovered by 35-year-old Zhang Jian, the husband and father of the victims, when he returned home from a night shift at 6 o'clock a.m. Soon as he entered the house, Zhang sensed something was terribly wrong. The home was eerily silent. No clatter from the kitchen, no chatter from the living room. He called out to his wife and daughters, but received no answer. A wave of dread rose within him, rushing to the bedroom. Zhang was met with a nightmare. His wife lay motionless on the bed, her face pale and lifeless beside her. Their 2 young daughters were also still and cold. Zhang felt his world collapse, refusing to believe his eyes. He frantically shook them, calling their names, desperate to wake them, but it was too late to connect. He called the police. His voice trembling, and broken officers arrived quickly. The main bedroom reeked of diethyl ether, a chemical once used as an anesthetic, with a distinct smell like alcohol or volatile solvent. It's easily recognized by trained investigators, and its lingering scent around the victims' mouths and noses hinted they may have been drugged before death. Zhang's wife lay with a swollen, bruised face. Her lips were dark purple, her eyes wide open, with dried blood at her mouth and nose. Red marks along her neck suggested a hand or a pillow pressed hard against her face. Her clenched hands revealed a desperate struggle before losing consciousness. The pillow next to her had bloodstains and clear handprints, indicating great force. Blood had soaked deep into the fabric. The edges were frayed and torn, with indentations in the middle and strands of the victim's hair stuck in the material. Investigators also found small pillow fibers on her face and neck, proving it had been used to smother her. This everyday household item had become a murder weapon in the same room. The elder daughter's body lay on the floor, eyes wide open, with visible marks on her face, and dressing suspicions that he might have still harbored feelings for her. According to several acquaintances, before Zhang Minggu married Zhang Zihan, she and Mr. Li had briefly dated in college, while they broke up amicably. Some friends recalled that Mr. Li took the breakup harder than he admitted after Mingo's marriage. Mr. Li continued to visit their home often, under the pretense of being a family friend, even joining their family gatherings and outings. Occasionally, Li's began to probe deeper into Mr. Li's background and found concerning details. He was unmarried, lived alone, and had recently lost his job. Witnesses described his demeanor as increasingly erratic in the weeks before the murders, quick-tempered, and often drinking heavily. Neighbors said he had been seen lurking near the Zhang residence, late at night, on multiple occasions. A more troubling discovery emerged when investigators examined Mr. Li's phone records and computer. They found multiple deleted messages sent to Zhang Minggu over the years, many expressing longing, jealousy, and even resentment toward her marriage. Some recent messages, recovered through digital forensics, suggested he had tried to convince her to leave. Her husband Minggu had never replied. The police theorized that Mr. Li might have developed an unhealthy obsession with Ming, growing increasingly bitter as he saw her living a happy life with her husband and children, something he may have believed should have been his. Forensic analysis further implicated him. Though the crime scene appeared to have been carefully cleaned, police found a partial shoe print in the garden soil near the window when compared to Mr. Lee's shoes. The tread pattern and size were consistent. Additionally, trace amounts of a rare industrial-grade ether were found in his garage, the same chemical detected around Mingu's nose and mouth when brought in for questioning. Mr. Lee initially denied any involvement, claiming he had been home that night. However, CCTV footage from a gas station placed his car a few streets away from the Jang residence at 1:47 a.m. Around the estimated time of death, the combination of physical evidence, psychological motive, and opportunity made Mr. Lee the primary suspect. Yet, the police still faced one challenge. No direct DNA or fingerprint evidence linked him to the murders. Whoever killed the family had been meticulous, wearing gloves and likely cleaning up after themselves. The investigators theorized that Mr. Lee, familiar with the house's layout and routines, might have used his close friendship with Jang Zehan to enter quietly, either through the unlocked door or the always open bedroom window. He could have waited until the victims were asleep, used the ether to incapacitate them, and then suffocated each one quickly, using the same pillow to muffle their cries. Scenario aligned with the evidence: the lack of forced entry, the absence of loud noise or signs of a prolonged struggle, and the presence of all three victims. DNA on the same pillow. The emotional intensity of the killings, methodical yet personal, also fits someone who felt betrayed and deeply resembled. The police prepared to gather more conclusive proof, including seeking a warrant to search Mr. Lee's residence for clothing fibers, any hidden diaries or notes, and potential trophies from the crime scene that he might have kept. Soon so arose about the real dynamics among the three initial suspects. Investigators learned that Mr. Lee had a prior history of domestic violence and had once been sued by his ex-wife's family in 2003. Although Jang had not installed security cameras inside his home, nearby street surveillance could potentially reveal who entered or exited the Jang residence. On the night of the murders, reviewing the footage, police saw that at around 9 p.m. on April 20th, a man with a build resembling Mr. Lee's was loitering near the Jang house around the same time. A hair sample recovered from the crime scene initially matched Mr. Lee's DNA, raising further suspicions. Despite this, Mr. Lee consistently denied being at the Jang residence that night. He claimed he had stayed home all evening with his wife, offering her as his alibi. He insisted he had no reason to harm his friend's family, explaining that while he had witnessed arguments between Jang Zehan and his wife, they were minor and not serious enough to provoke violence. Mr. Lee further argued that the hair found at the scene likely came from one of his many past visits to the house. Regarding the surveillance footage, he stated it must have been someone else of similar build. He acknowledged his history of domestic violence, but stressed that he had worked hard to change and had lived peacefully for over 3 years. On closer review, police realized that the man in the surveillance video was actually a neighbor who had a similar build to Mr. Lee. This neighbor confirmed that he often walked around the area late at night due to insomnia, a fact well known among local residents. The hair sample was re-examined and determined to be old, likely shed during one of Mr. Lee's earlier visits, making its presence at the scene unsurprising. With this new information, police cleared Mr. Lee of suspicion, concluding that the evidence linking him to the murders was either coincidental or part of an attempt to frame him. However, during Mr. Lee's questioning, investigators learned of another possible suspect, Mrs. Wong, a 40-year-old neighbor who had ongoing land disputes with Jang Mingu. Notably, Mrs. Wong was the only person who claimed to have seen a strange man entering and leaving the Jang residence the night of the murders, yet her statements were riddled with inconsistencies. Further investigation revealed alarming evidence. A cloth soaked in ether was found in her trash, and traces of blood matching one of the Jang children were discovered on her window. When confronted, Mrs. Wang could not explain how these items ended up there. She had a documented history of mental illness and had previously displayed violent behavior during interrogation. Mrs. Wang appeared disoriented and gave incoherent answers. She admitted to having conflicts with Zhang Minggu over land, but denied ever wanting to harm her. Medical records from a local hospital showed that Mrs. Wang suffered from paranoid tendencies, which could cause her to imagine events that never occurred. Doctors suggested this might explain her inconsistent claims about seeing a strange man at the Zhang home still. The ether-soaked cloth and the blood on her window were undeniable pieces of physical evidence. Although her mental state made her behavior suspicious, some officers believed she might have been deliberately framed by the real perpetrator, who was exploiting her instability and reputation because of these conflicting opinions. Police could not conclusively determine her guilt. They placed Mrs. Wang under surveillance for safety reasons and ensured she received psychological support, while continuing to search for stronger evidence or other suspects. The final suspect on the list was the Zhang family's former housekeeper, Mrs. Luwu, 35. She had once been trusted by the family but was suddenly dismissed under unclear circumstances. Rumors spread that she had an inappropriate relationship with Zhang, which supposedly led to her being fired by Zhang Minggu's. Luwu reportedly felt humiliated and wronged by this gossip and by the neighbor's judgment after being dismissed. She also claimed that Zhang Minggu had refused to pay her remaining wages and bonuses, forcing her into financial hardship and debt. While this created resentment, it did not seem severe enough to drive her to murder. However, an old phone belonging to Mrs. Lu was discovered at the crime scene. It contained numerous threatening messages sent to Zhang Minggu. Police also found an unexplained large deposit in Mrs. Louis' bank account shortly after the murders. After a thorough investigation, these clues were proven to be misleading. Mrs. Lu had reported to friends that her phone had gone missing weeks before the killings. Though she never officially reported it, forensic analysis confirmed that the threatening messages began only after her phone went missing. Digital records showed the messages had been sent from various locations far from where Mrs. Louis was at those times. She also provided receipts and witness statements proving her presence at other places. When the messages were sent, the large deposit was traced back to a personal bank loan she had applied for before the murders to cover living expenses and debts, and all related documents checked out as authentic. With these findings, police concluded that Mrs. Luwu had neither the motive nor the opportunity to commit the crime. While her conflicts with the Zhang family were real, they were not strong enough to turn her into a ruthless killer. The truth about the stolen phone further supported her innocence and indicated that the real culprit had likely used her and Mrs. Wang as scapegoats to mislead the investigation. After being cleared of all suspicion, Mrs. Lu agreed to cooperate with the police and give a detailed statement about what she knew. In her testimony, she described several suspicious incidents involving Zhang Ziyan, whom investigators had initially ruled out because of an alibi supported by co-workers, claiming he was at work during the night of the murders and only returned home the next morning. Mrs. Louis recounted witnessing several heated arguments between Zhang Ziyan and his wife before she was fired. Their relationship, though appearing harmonious to outsiders, was known by those close to them to be deeply strained. Zhang Ziyan was a quiet, reserved man who was often away due to work, but whenever he was home, he frequently clashed with his wife Zhang Minggu over parenting issues and other major family decisions. Despite these tensions, Zhang Minggu tried to maintain stability and harmony for the sake of their daughters, who were often witnesses to their parents' disputes. On the surface, the Zhang family appeared normal and happy, but deeper investigation revealed troubling dynamics that became crucial to understanding the truth behind the deaths of Zhang Minggu and her two daughters. A major turning point came when Mrs. Mu, one of Zhang Ziyan's co-workers, recalled seeing him near Mrs. Louis' neighborhood the day before the murders. She hadn't thought much of it at the time, but when she heard about the police investigating Mrs. Louis, she mentioned it, hoping it might help security footage from that area confirmed Mrs. Mu's account. Zhang Ziyan was seen lingering near Mrs. Lu's house on the same night Mrs. Lu reported her phone missing. This raised suspicion that he had stolen her phone to carry out part of his plan. Investigators then traced the threatening messages sent to Zhang Minghua and discovered that originated from areas near Zhang Ziyan's workplace. This evidence strongly indicated that he had been using Mrs. Lu Wu's stolen phone in April 25th. The police summoned Zhang Ziyan for questioning. Confronted with the new evidence, he vehemently denied everything, claiming his presence near Mrs. Lu's house was just a coincidence tied to a personal errand, and insisting he had nothing to do with stealing her phone or sending threatening messages. However, when presented with the network records, he had no plausible explanation further. Investigation revealed that his alibi was fabricated. The coworker who had claimed he stayed at work all night had actually been bribed to lie in reality. Zhang Ziyan had left his workplace around 10 p.m. and returned at 4 a.m. with all the evidence aligned. The police concluded that Zhang Ziyan had orchestrated the entire crime, meticulously planning the murders, creating a false alibi, and framing Mrs. Lu by stealing her phone to send threatening messages, all to mislead the investigation. At last, confronted with the overwhelming proof, Zhang Ziyan confessed his motive was chilling. He wanted to live openly with his mistress, Mrs. Su-29. Their affair had started about 3 years before the murders, initially just colleagues. They gradually grew attracted to each other, and eventually began a secret romantic relationship. Meanwhile, Zhang Ziyan's marriage with Zhang Minghua had deteriorated. They constantly argued over finances, parenting, and family decisions. Feeling trapped and unhappy, he found comfort in Mrs. Su, who was attractive, intelligent, and charming. Over time, their affair deepened, and they even had a child together. This made them want to be together officially, but they saw Zhang Minghua and the 2 daughters as obstacles. Divorce was not an option. They owned substantial property and savings, and by law, Zhang Minghua would receive most of it. Encouraged by Mrs. Su, Zhang Ziyan decided that murder was the only way to remove these obstacles. About 3 months before the murders, the two plotted the crime in detail. They chose a night when Zhang Ziyan could create an alibi by staying late at work and then returning home early in the morning. Backed by false witnesses during that time, he would secretly slip out and kill his wife and daughters. He studied his neighborhood thoroughly and discovered there was only one surveillance camera covering the front gate, so he planned to enter through a blind spot to avoid detection. He also stole Mrs. Lu's phone from her house while she was away, later using it to send threatening messages to Zhang Minghua the day before the murders to make her anxious and mislead police suspicion toward Mrs. Lu on April 19, 2006. He executed his brutal plan late at night. He used a rope to climb into his own house while his wife and daughters were sleeping, carrying an ether-soaked cloth. He silently approached his wife's bed, pressing the cloth over her nose and mouth. He rendered her unconscious, then suffocated her with a pillow until she died. During this, his 12-year-old daughter woke up and witnessed the scene in panic. He attacked her first, rendering her unconscious with the ether cloth, then suffocating her with a pillow. The struggle and cries woke his 8-year-old daughter, who screamed in terror. To silence her, he killed her the same way, anesthetizing her with ether and then suffocating her after killing his wife and daughters. Zhang Ziyan immediately called Mrs. Su to report what was happening, as if to prove his commitment to their plan. His ruthless actions were driven not only by Mrs. Su's instigation, but also by his own greed and complete lack of conscience. Once the murders were done, he swiftly moved to the next part of his plan, misleading the police and framing others first. He took the ether-soaked cloth used to anesthetize Zhang Minghua and his 2 daughters and discarded it in Mrs. Wang's trash can, believing this would make investigators suspect her. He carefully took a piece of cloth soaked in Zhang Minghua's blood and went near Mrs. Wang's window, smearing the blood on it to further implicate her. He brought along Mrs. Lu's stolen cell phone and placed it near Mrs. Wong's house to make it appear as if Mrs. Lu and Mrs. Wong were closely connected to the crime. His aim was clear: ensure that both Mrs. Lu and Mrs. Wong became suspects. Diverting suspicion away from himself, Zhang Zian executed these actions meticulously, hoping the fabricated evidence would deceive investigators. However, his efforts ultimately failed. The police persistently investigated, spotted inconsistencies, and eventually arrested him when interrogated. Mrs. Su admitted she had been almost fully aware of the entire incident through phone calls from Zhang Zian. She testified that on the night of the murders, she received a call from him while he was committing the crime. During the call, he described in chilling detail how he climbed into the house with a rope, approached his sleeping wife and daughters, and what he planned to do next. Mrs. Su said she felt regretful and terrified upon realizing he was truly going to kill them. She pleaded with him to stop, especially when he mentioned killing the children, but her pleas failed to change his mind. In a frenzy driven by greed and rage, Zhang Zian ignored her begging and carried out the murders. Mrs. Su admitted that although she did not directly participate, she helped plan the murders with him and only regretted it when it was too late. Her testimony gave police valuable insight into his motives, and the full sequence of events. Investigators concluded that while she didn't commit the killings, she knew about the plan, encouraged him, and failed to report it, which made her legally responsible as an accessory. Her statements not only confirmed Zhang Zian's crimes, but also revealed the brutality and inhumanity behind them. On May 1st, the Supreme Court sentenced Zhang Zian to death on 3 counts of murder, and sentenced Mrs. Su to 15 years in prison for being an accessory to murder. This horrific case left unending pain for the victims' loved ones and served as a stark reminder of the dangers of greed, selfishness, and irresponsibility within a family. Showed that love and happiness cannot be built on deceit and betrayal, and that dishonesty can destroy entire families. Zian's extramarital affair and immoral actions led to tragedy, claiming the lives of 3 innocent people, including 2 young children. Lesson from this case emphasizes the importance of honesty and responsibility in family relationships. Each individual must carefully consider their actions and cherish their loved ones. It underscores the need to instill ethical values in younger generations, helping them understand the grave consequences of wrongful actions. We must also raise awareness and maintain a strong stance against crime to protect justice and peace in our communities. Story 4. In our daily lives, we sometimes swallow our pride and endure hardships just to survive in a tough work environment. However, this endurance can sometimes lead to immense risks, even pushing our lives into the depths of crime. Today's case is a clear and vivid example of silent crimes within the workplace. Chong, a district in Nongjianggu Province, China, is known for its picturesque scenery and prosperous tourism industry. The area is filled with thriving businesses, especially tour companies and guides, making it a popular tourist destination. Everything was flourishing until early 2003, when a shocking crime shattered the peace at around 8:15 p.m. on April 6, 2003. A tourist named Su Minghua was walking her dog in a park when her dog suddenly began barking at an empty lot. She noticed a sign stating that the lot belonged to a well-known tourism company in Changwon. Chihuahua had expanded into the restaurant and hotel business, and this centrally located lot, with excellent transportation access, was planned to become a large hotel. As a tourist, Su Minghua didn't know much about it, and seeing that it was fenced and privately owned, she decided not to enter. But unexpectedly, her dog broke free from its leash, slipped through a gap, and ran straight inside. She tried calling her dog back, but it didn't return. With no choice, she decided to find the security guard of the lot to get inside and search. However, after looking everywhere, she found no guards and no contact numbers. Just as she was at a loss, her dog returned, carrying a blood-stained piece of cloth in its mouth. Alarmed, she immediately called the police, suspecting there might be a human corpse in the lot the Chungwan district. Police arrived quickly and tried to contact Chi, but received no response until about 9:40 p.m. Once contacted, Xiaowa sent someone to unlock the gate so police could investigate inside. The lot was scattered with construction materials, following Su Minggua's dog into a deeper area. The dog began digging and barking wildly soon. A piece of brown fabric appeared from the soil. Realizing the severity, the police called for backup and reported the situation to higher authorities with approval. They began excavating. They found the victim's body, buried face down in a pit about 15 meters deep, half a meter wide, and 2 meters long. Recent heavy rains had turned the soil to mud, making recovery difficult. It took over half an hour to carefully extract the intact body. The body was wrapped in a white plastic sheet, which tore during transportation, revealing the upper body. Initial examination could not determine the cause or time of death, so the body was sent for full forensic analysis. Back at the station, the forensic team began their work, starting with thoroughly cleaning the body to avoid misjudgment. After over 12 hours of continuous effort, the examination was complete. The forensic team provided their preliminary findings. After completing the initial examination, the victim was a male, estimated to be between 35 and 48 years old, who had died between 9 p.m. and midnight on April 2, 2003. Due to massive blood loss, the body bore numerous injuries, none fatal on their own but collectively enough to cause death. The victim's face had been slashed multiple times, and in a particularly brutal act, his genitals were cut off and stuffed into his mouth. After death, the killer also stabbed the victim in the heart, post-mortem, puncturing it and severing several nerves. The victim's hands and feet showed clear evidence of being tightly bound, and all of his fingers were completely fractured. The sheer savagery of the killing indicated a deep-seated grudge. However, the absence of blood and signs of struggle at the scene made it clear that the location was only used to dispose of the body, not where the murder actually took place. The lot itself, enclosed by a 15-meter-high fence, was private property belonging to Chiawa Company, making it inaccessible to outsiders. This led investigators to suspect that the killer was someone from within the company who had access to the keys. As soon as the news of the gruesome discovery spread, it caused widespread shock and speculation. Because the victim had no identification on him, the police had to rely on recent missing person reports. Among those who had reported someone missing, one case stood out. Sung Yan, the daughter of Sung Ding, the director of Xiaowa Company and the owner of the lot where the body had been found. Police immediately contacted Song Yan. She arrived accompanied by her mother, Mrs. Song. Both women appeared striking and strong-willed, though their faces were drawn with exhaustion as soon as they arrived. Song Yan anxiously asked about the unidentified body. The police escorted them inside to confirm the victim's identity. Upon seeing the body, Song Yan broke down and rushed outside to vomit. Mrs. Song, however, forced herself to stay calm and examined the victim's foot. Upon spotting a large blue birthmark on the sole, she collapsed and fainted on the spot. It took some time before she regained consciousness. Police took Song Yan's statement. She explained that on the morning of April 2, 2003, her father, Song Dinj, had left home for what he claimed was a business meeting. That day also happened to be her birthday. Each year, the family would gather and celebrate together, and her father had promised to return early around 6 p.m. She called him to remind him to buy a few things on his way back, but his phone was switched off, initially thinking he was still busy. She and her mother waited late into the night, but he never returned, and his phone remained unreachable. Worried, Song Yan went to her father's office, where his secretary said he hadn't shown up that day. She also contacted the business partner her father was supposed to meet, only to learn that they had actually signed the contract 2 days earlier. At this point, her anxiety turned into panic. She reported her father missing to the police and began her own search. but found no leads then. On the afternoon of April 3rd, Mr. Song's car was discovered in a suburban area over 30 kilometers southwest of the city center. This area had recently been purchased by Chiawa Company for a resort project. So, finding the car there wasn't particularly suspicious, however. When Song Yan checked inside, she noticed the dashcam's memory card was missing. The area was sparsely populated, leaving no further clues. Since then, Song Yan and her mother had been tirelessly searching, always hoping he would return now, confronted with his lifeless body. They were devastated. Song Yan described her father as a kind and gentle man who treated everyone with respect, even when employees made mistakes. He never scolded them harshly. At most, he would deduct some pay from their salary at home. He was a loving husband and father who had never been involved in any affairs or questionable relationships, despite his success and wealth. After collecting their statements, the police allowed the grieving mother and daughter to leave to arrange Mr. Song's funeral. Meanwhile, the investigation split into two teams, one to probe deeper into Chiawa Company, and another to re-examine the site where Mr. Song's car had been found. The first team visited the company and met with the director's secretary, a 25-year-old woman named Chin Ji. When asked about the last time she saw her boss, Chin recalled seeing him on the evening of April 1st. He had asked her to prepare documents for a meeting with foreign partners. After she handed them over, he left with another assistant named Lin Ning. The next day, Mr. Song didn't come to the office, and when Song Yan came to check in the evening, he was still missing. Chin admitted that everyone at the office had been searching for the director and expressed disbelief over his death. However, as she spoke, the police noted a striking contradiction. While her words were respectful, her eyes revealed an underlying hatred. They grew suspicious of her, though they had no evidence yet, so they let her be. They sought out the other assistant, Lin Ning, a 20-year-old recent graduate from Nanjing University, exceptionally talented in economics. She had quickly become Mr. Song's assistant when the police found her. She was handling matters related to the resort project in the suburbs upon being told of Mr. Song's death. Lin Ning appeared genuinely shocked and claimed she had been on a business trip to Yan since April 3rd. She said she only knew Mr. Song had gone missing, but was unaware of his death at the station. She explained that on the night of April 1st, she had accompanied Mr. Song to a business meeting. Once the meeting concluded, she left. Unaware of where he went afterwards, she added that the business partner they met had insisted on remaining anonymous until the project was complete. Her statement didn't give the police any useful leads, so she was released. Still, the officers noticed that although Lin Ning claimed ignorance, she appeared visibly tense. To ensure she was telling the truth, they quietly assigned a small surveillance team to monitor her in secret. Another police team revisited the site where Mr. Song's car had been found. Song Yan had already moved the car home to keep the incident from becoming public. The officers confirmed the interior had not been disturbed. There were no visible tire tracks around the scene due to recent rain, and no houses nearby that might offer witnesses. However, upon inspecting the car and the family garage, they saw mud from the suburban area still clinging to the tires. Song Yan pointed out that her father was extremely particular about cleanliness, and he would wash his car every few days, with the last wash recorded on April 1st, when forensic experts conducted a detailed examination. They discovered a few light brown hairs under the passenger seat. Since both Mrs. Zhang and Song Yan had black hair, the brown hairs likely belonged to another woman who might be connected to Mr. Song Dinjuan's death. The police collected the hair samples for testing at that point. There were two known women with brown hair who had interacted with Mr. Song before his death, Chen Jie and Lin Ning. The police decided to discreetly monitor both of them to avoid raising suspicion, planning to act only if they noticed anything unusual. Meanwhile, after a long recovery, Mr. Song's wife, Zhang, was finally stable enough to be interviewed at the station. She confessed My husband and I had been emotionally distant for a long time, but we pretended to be happy for our daughter Song Yen's sake. After giving birth to her, my health deteriorated. Even if I could get pregnant again, it was unlikely I could carry the baby to term. 2 years later, I got pregnant again, but despite my efforts, I miscarried in the 3rd month. Since then, the rift between us grew deeper, but we never tried to reconcile. We stayed together. Only for our daughter. I knew my husband was having an affair at first. I tried to stop it, but eventually, I realized there was nothing I could do. So I turned a blind eye. The person he was involved with is his assistant, Chen Jie. I even have evidence. She then handed over a stack of photographs showing Song Dingyan and Chen Jie in various intimate poses. In some, he held her by the waist, and in others, they were kissing. However, what caught the investigators' attention was that Chen Jie's face in all the photos showed clear resistance and discomfort. None of them showed her enjoying or reciprocating his advances. The police found this puzzling and asked Mrs. Zhang if she knew why, but she shook her head, saying she didn't. Also explained that, despite knowing about the affair, she chose not to confront Chen Jie to protect her husband's and the company's reputation. This clue was crucial. Investigators began to suspect Chen Jie might have developed a conflict with Mr. Song and killed him. The team then searched for nearby surveillance footage that might show who disposed of the body. After much effort, they located a tape from a nearby intersection showing a corner of the empty lot where the body was found. At 1:35 a.m. on April 3rd, 2 figures appeared, carrying a heavy object wrapped in black cloth. They came from the west side of the frame, unlocked the lot's gate, and went inside. About an hour later, at around 2:40 a.m., they left separately. The figures were small in stature, roughly 5 feet 4 inches to 5 feet 6 inches tall, dressed in black, and appeared physically weak, struggling to carry what the police believed to be Mr. Song's body. When the police had spoken to Mrs. Shirong, who managed the lot near the park, she mentioned that the original documents and keys were split into 2 sets. One she kept at home, and the other was with Mr. Song's secretary. This pointed the investigation back to Chen Jie as the main suspect. At the same time, the team tailing Chen Jie reported losing her. They had followed her to a mall, but she disappeared inside a store and never came out, realizing she had slipped away. All available officers were mobilized. A team was sent to her home, where they found something odd. Despite her high-paying job, she lived in a shabby rental house with almost no valuable belongings. The wardrobe was empty, suggesting she had planned her escape in advance while the police were there. A neighbor returned home and, seeing them, asked, "Did Chen Jie do something illegal?" When the officers vaguely said they needed her for questioning, the neighbor replied, "I knew it. I always thought something like this would happen. She has a father who's an alcoholic, a mother who's a gambling addict, and a brother in jail for a hit and run. Growing up in that kind of environment, how could she turn out good? I've seen her with an older man many times." When asked when she last saw Chen Jie with this man, the neighbor said, "Around noon on April 2nd, I was cooking and saw her leave the house. A middle-aged man was waiting at the gate. I haven't seen him since." The police showed her a photo of Mr. Song, and she confirmed he was the man she saw. They collected a few strands of hair from Chen Jie's house for comparison with the hair found in Mr. Song's car and left. Meanwhile, the team monitoring Lin Ning reported that she was heading out with a large bag, seemingly trying to flee, believing she might be escaping with Chen Jie. Officers discreetly followed her at the train station. Lin Ning met Chen Jie in a secluded corner. The police moved in and arrested them both. Within 10 minutes they were placed in separate interrogation rooms. Chen Jie remained silent, knowing there was no direct evidence linking her to the murder. But Lin Ning, only 20 years old and inexperienced, eventually broke down under pressure, especially after being shown the surveillance footage of them disposing of the body. She confessed everything. Lin Ning revealed she had grown up in a large, impoverished family Her parents had unstable jobs and often fought, keeping the family in constant poverty when she was 8. Her parents died in a car accident. Her 2 older sisters were sent to an orphanage. Her younger brother was adopted by a wealthy family, and she was taken in by her grandparents, though they were poor. Her grandparents scraped together enough to send her to school. She studied hard, hoping to repay their kindness, but when she got into college, her grandfather passed away, followed shortly by her grandmother, who fell ill from griefs. Lin Ning had lost her last remaining family, devastated. She reconnected with Chen Jie, an upperclassman who had helped her through tough times before. After graduating, Chen Jie secured a high-paying job, but then after graduating, Chen Jie was hired by the Chiyowa company, unaware that this new job would become her personal nightmare at first. She worked hard and kept a low profile, slowly earning the trust of the company's director, Song Dingyuan. But as time went on, she began to notice his darker side. He was manipulative, predatory, and used his power to exploit vulnerable young women working under him. By then, Chen Jie had lost contact with Lin Ning. The younger classmates she had once mentored, their paths had diverged as they pursued different futures. While Chen climbed the corporate ladder, Lin Ning excelled in her studies and graduated with honors. Hoping for a bright future, when Lin Ning saw a job posting for an assistant position at Chiawa, she eagerly applied. To her surprise, the interviewer was Chen Jie, expecting recognition and support from her former mentor. She was crushed when Chen pretended not to know her and rejected her outright. Dejected, Lin Ning left the office, only to accidentally bump into Director Song on her way out. He asked her name and why she was there. When she explained, he simply smiled and walked away. The next day, she received an unexpected offer. Letter Song had personally hired her at first. Lin Ning was grateful, thinking he had seen potential in her. She worked diligently, unaware of the trap she had stepped into for 3 months. Song kept his distance, but the moment her probation ended, everything changed. She was told she had to accompany Song on a 3-day business trip to Yan, thinking it was an opportunity for growth. She agreed, but once they arrived, Song took her to a boutique and made her try on a tight-fitting dress, then brought her to a luxury hotel, where several of his associates were waiting. The moment she entered the suite, one of the men handed her a drink and forced her to consume it. As the alcohol dulled her senses, she begged Song for help, but he ignored her. The men cornered her, tore her dress, and began groping her. Lin Ning struggled desperately, but she was overpowered and assaulted by several of them. In turn, that night scarred her forever. She was left broken, physically violated, and emotionally Song threatened her with a secret recording of the assault, promising to release it if she told anyone. Lin Ning had no evidence, no resources, and no one to trust. The shame and fear nearly drove her to end her life. It was at her lowest point that Chen Jie reappeared. Seeing Lin Ning's condition, she quietly revealed that she too had once suffered under Song's abuse, having endured years of harassment and coercion. Chen Jie had long dreamed of ending his tyranny. Now, seeing Lin Ning destroyed the same way she once was, Chen resolved to act. The 2 women formed a desperate pact. They would kill Song Dingyuan. April 2nd, Chen Jie lured Song to a secluded suburban house he had purchased, telling him it was for a private business meeting. The house was conveniently close to an empty lot owned by Chiawa Company, where future resort construction was planned. Quiet, isolated, and rarely visited. As they drove, Song made crude, vulgar remarks about Lin Ning, further hardening Chen Jie's resolve. Once there, while Song was showering, Chen Jie secretly slipped a strong sleeping pill into his orange juice. When he drank it, he quickly collapsed. Chen called Lin Ning, and together they bound him. When Song regained consciousness, they confronted him with all the pain he had caused. Their rage exploded. They tortured him with a knife until he finally died. To cover their tracks, Lin Ning drove Song's car alone to the empty lot, creating the illusion that he had gone there himself. Then she returned, and together they carried his body to the lot near the park. because Chen Jie, as his secretary, had a spare set of keys to the company properties. They could easily access the area. They dug a shallow grave, but due to their lack of strength, the grave was not deep enough. Days later, the body resurfaced, triggering the investigation that would unravel their plan. When police later interrogated them separately, Lin Ning broke down under pressure and confessed first. She admitted that she and Chen Jie had killed Song initially. She claimed it was her idea, and that Chen had only assisted her when told of Lin Ning's confession. Chen Jie finally spoke. She insisted that she was the one who had planned and carried out the killing, and that Lin Ning had only helped under duress. Investigators doubted this, but Chen explained her motives by revealing her painful past. Chen had grown up in a deeply broken home. Her father was an alcoholic, her mother a gambling addict, and her younger brother was born with a disability. As the eldest child, Chen was forced to carry the household's burdens when she refused to quit school to work. Her parents grew resentful. Her father often came home drunk and lashed out at her, while her mother pawned off valuable belongings to fund her gambling habits. Punishing Chen whenever she lost, her brother bullied and exploited her as well, forcing her to take part-time jobs to support him. Still, Chen persevered, determined to escape. When she was 17, her brother got involved in a robbery and was caught after a car accident. Her parents demanded she give up all her savings to pay restitution, and when she refused, they beat her and threw her out homeless and desperate. Chen survived only because a kind teacher gave her shelter and encouraged her to continue her education. She worked multiple jobs, graduated high school, and got into university. Even then, her parents tracked her down, harassing her until she agreed to send them money every month. She endured all of it just to finish school and break free. Was during these university years that she befriended Lin Ning, who became like a younger sister to her. Lin Ning often comforted her during her parents' cruel outbursts. After graduating, Chen secured her job at Chiawa Company, believing her hardships were finally over. Instead, she stepped into another prison. Song Dingyuan soon began using her as he had used many others when she tried to resist. He threatened to ruin her career and release fabricated rumors. Over the years, he eroded her will, trapping her in silence. By the time Lin Ning reappeared in her life, Chen had been worn down but not entirely broken. Seeing Lin Ning suffer the same abuse reignited the rage she had buried. Together, they chose to end the cycle of torment the only way they believed was possible, and that choice led them to murder. Chen Jie had once believed that hard work would lead to success, just as Lin Ning did. One day, after finishing her tasks, Chen Jie was called into her boss Mr. Song's office. He offered her a glass of juice, and after drinking it, she suddenly felt dizzy and weak. When she tried to leave, Mr. Song restrained her and raped her. When Chen Jie regained consciousness, she was in immense physical pain and overwhelmed with shame. This traumatic experience pushed her into a long period of depression. She didn't have the courage to quit or report the incident to the police. Despite the trauma, Chen Jie continued working at the Xiaowa Company. She convinced herself that if she used her body to gain benefits and save enough money, she could eventually escape to prevent other girls from suffering the same fate. She deliberately rejected all female applicants for the secretary position. However, things changed when Lin Ning applied, wanting to protect her friend. Chen Jie rejected her, but Lin Ning caught Mr. Song's attention and was hired anyway, while Chen Jie tried to shield her. Mr. Song sent Chen Jie on a business trip and took Lin Ning to Yan, where he and his friends assaulted. After the assault, Lin Ning confided in Chen Jie. Enraged, Chen Jie planned to kill Mr. Song and dispose of his body. Both women later confessed to the murder, and the police brought them back to the crime scene to reconstruct events. Jie recounted the entire crime without hesitation, while Lin Ning broke down in tears. Forensic tests confirmed that a hair sample from Mr. Song's car matched Chen Jie with both witness testimony and physical evidence. The court sentenced Chen Jie to death for the brutal nature of the crime. Lin Ning received a 15-year prison sentence as an accomplice. She had been so terrified during the killing that she covered her eyes. And all of Mr. Song's injuries were inflicted by Chen Jae-lin. Ning only helped dispose of the body, which is why her sentence was lighter. Chun Jae had once had a promising future, but people like Song Dingyin turned her into a cold-blooded killer. Hopefully, Lin Ning will be able to rebuild her life after her release. Story 5. One of the most brutal cases in Singapore's history was a case so horrifying that it haunted even the most seasoned investigators. The victim was a 23-year-old woman from Myanmar named Pong Naden, who left her homeland with dreams of a better life. Born on June 13, 1992, in a remote village in Chin State, Myanmar. Pong grew up in extreme poverty. Her parents were farmers, and their village was about 43 miles of rugged terrain from the nearest town. Life was harsh, and even having a full meal was rare. Pong was the third eldest of 11 children when she was just 4. Both of her parents passed away, leaving the burden of raising the younger children to her older siblings over the next decade. 5 of her younger siblings died from hunger and illness, so though Pong briefly attended school, she left at 15 to care for her surviving siblings. By 18, she met a young man and began a relationship. In 2012, she became pregnant, but the man abandoned her despite her struggles. Pong chose to raise her baby alone. In 2013, she gave birth to a baby boy to support her child and family. She worked at a nearby construction site hauling bricks and stones. The work was exhausting and the pay was meager. One day, she heard about domestic worker jobs in Singapore that paid 3 to 4 times more than her current income despite her limited education and never having left her hometown. Pong was determined to try. She planned to work in Singapore for 3 years, save enough money, and return home to build a house. Her family supported her decision, seeing it as a chance to escape poverty. Because Singapore required domestic workers to be at least 23 years old, and Pong was a few months younger, she paid someone to alter her birth date on her documents. In May 2015, Pong arrived in Singapore full of hope after completing the training and registration procedures. She was hired by a family. Her employer was 35-year-old housewife Gaither Moran. The household included Gaither's husband, 37-year-old police officer Kevin Ch, their 57-year-old mother, Premise, and their 2 children, 4-year-old daughter, and a baby boy, just a few months old. One alarming detail was that before hiring Pong, this family had already gone through 4 domestic workers, all of whom had left under troubling and unclear circumstances. Pong was their 5th. They lived in an apartment at 145 Bishan Street 11. In central Singapore. It had 3 bedrooms, spacious by city standards. There were a total of 8 people crammed into the small apartment, including 2 tenants and Pong Naden herself. On May 28, when Pong first stepped into Guy Thai's home, she told herself, "This will be my home in Singapore for at least the next year, maybe even longer." Despite how cramped and crowded the apartment was, far more than she had imagined, she resolved to adapt to her new living environment. Pong's main duties were to care for the 2 children, clean the house, cook meals, and handle all household chores. Although the workload was demanding, Pong, who had grown up facing hardship, did not find it unbearable at first. In the days that followed, she worked diligently, striving to complete every task perfectly, in hopes of pleasing her employer. But that hope quickly faded when she realized her work environment was far from what she had expected. Guy Thai was extremely strict and had impossibly high standards. She constantly complained, criticizing Pong for eating too much, working too slowly, and not being clean enough. Rarely did Guy Thai show even the slightest sign of satisfaction or warmth. This disheartened Pong, but she reminded herself she was there to earn money. Money never comes easily. To avoid angering her employer, Pong pushed herself to work even harder and never talked back, yet her efforts seemed pointless. No matter how hard she tried, she faced daily reprimands and criticisms. Making matters worse, Guy Thai's 57-year-old mother, Prima, also began closely monitoring her at first. The mother and daughter only scolded her verbally, but as time passed, their behavior grew increasingly cruel. They forbade Pong from using her phone, deprived her of the single day off she was supposed to receive each week, and denied her any rest time at all under pressure from her employers and hoping to earn a bit more. Pong reluctantly agreed to work overtime. She comforted herself by thinking that if she endured this hardship, she would soon save enough money to return home. By October, however, her situation had worsened. Despite becoming more obedient and complying with every demand, the abuse escalated from constant verbal insults to frequent physical beatings. Even so, Pong endured. Her harsh upbringing had conditioned her to tolerate suffering as a means of survival, but her submission only seemed to make Guy Thai and Prima more vicious. They not only slapped her, pulled her hair, and punched and kicked her, but also began using objects to torment her. On one occasion, they pressed a hot iron against her arm in addition to physical abuse. Pong's life was strictly controlled. She was allowed only 5 hours of sleep each night, forbidden to rest during the day, and given nothing but leftover scraps and soaked bread to eat. Even bathroom breaks were restricted under their relentless torment. Pong became increasingly frail and emaciated. Her mental state also began to deteriorate. During a routine medical checkup, a doctor noticed multiple scars on her body. However, Guy Thai claimed that Pong often worked in a hurry and had fallen several times, causing the injuries. Guy Thai's husband, Kevin, who was a police officer, reported to the employment agency that their domestic worker had many issues, but when the agency suggested replacing her, he refused. Pong herself never reported the abuse, so the matter was dropped. Then, on the morning of July 26, 2016, her 14th month in the household, Guy Thai found Pong lying on the floor, not getting up to work. Enraged, she and her mother shook Pong violently, but she did not respond. They tried everything they could, but she remained unresponsive. Alarmed, Guy Thai finally called a Dr. Kwan Wei Chi at 9:30 a.m., saying someone at her home was injured and urgently needed help. Dr. Kwan told her he was busy with other patients and advised calling an ambulance, but Guy Thai refused and insisted on waiting for him. He eventually arrived at 10:50 a.m. After a quick examination, he determined that Pong showed no signs of life and had been dead for some time. Upon hearing this, Guy Thai panicked and lied, saying, "That can't be true. I just saw her move a moment ago." Seeing the emaciated body, Dr. Kwan immediately suspected foul play. He urged Guy Thai to call the police and told her he would not leave until they arrived. Instead, she phoned her husband Kevin, asking him to come home quickly. Sensing something was wrong, Dr. Kwan decided to call the police himself. At 11:26 am, forensic specialists soon arrived and conducted a thorough examination. They found that the victim, Pong Naden, just 24 years old, weighed only 53 pounds. She was so severely malnourished that even normal daily tasks would have been difficult, let alone full household labor. Medical records showed that when Pong had first arrived at the household in May 2015, she weighed 86 pounds in 14 months. Her weight had dropped by 38%. Her body showed at least 31 fresh injuries and 47 older ones. Her right arm bore burn marks from an iron. Her neck was covered in wounds, and her hyoid bone was fractured. The cause of death was determined to be asphyxiation, following severe trauma to the neck. Based on these findings, police concluded that Pong had endured prolonged, inhumane abuse before her death. The primary suspects were her employer, Guy Thai, and her mother. Police immediately arrested both women, along with Kevin, although Kevin had an alibi proving he was not present at the time of death. A first-degree murder charge. He was still held accountable for the prolonged abuse and charged with grievous bodily harm. He was also suspended from the police force because the crime occurred inside a private home. There were no witnesses, and the suspects adamantly denied harming Pong. This made the investigation extremely difficult due to lack of evidence. However, after the case was made public, it caused a massive uproar in Singapore. One concerned resident who had seen the news provided police with a crucial piece of evidence: the hard drive from the surveillance cameras inside Guy Thai's home. That footage revealed the horrifying truth about what Pong had endured. Detectives began cross-referencing Alex's financial records with those of the law firm he had once worked at, as well as the personal accounts of victims who had trusted him with their settlements. What they found was staggering: an intricate web of shell companies, fake accounts, and falsified documents, some created years earlier and kept dormant until needed. One revelation struck the team particularly hard. Alex hadn't just siphoned money from settlements, he had actually engineered certain cases to ensure large payouts, manipulating vulnerable clients into filing lawsuits, and then rerouting their compensation once it came through. This wasn't simple theft, it was orchestration. Meanwhile, the emotional toll on those around Alex became more visible. Friends who had once defended him began admitting their doubts. Even some family members, previously steadfast, started cooperating with investigators. They spoke of moments they had brushed off at disappearances of paperwork, unexplained late-night meetings, and Alex's tendency to deflect any questions about finances with aggression or charm, depending on what he needed. Adding to the chaos, Russell Leffett, the bank CEO tied to Alex, was caught trying to move funds offshore. This triggered a flurry of legal actions, with prosecutors now pursuing charges of conspiracy, bank fraud, and money laundering. Fleming, Alex's former legal partner, quietly hired his own defense attorney and began distancing himself, though whispers suggested he was negotiating a plea deal in exchange for testifying against Alex. And through all of it, the trail of broken lives continued to grow. Families like the Pinckneys, who had lost their loved one and then the settlement meant to support them, demanded answers and justice. It was early morning when the task force moved in. Alex had been staying at one of his remote properties, an old hunting lodge deep in the woods, far from the bustle of town. He had grown increasingly paranoid in recent weeks, reportedly carrying multiple phones, installing hidden cameras, and even sleeping with a handgun on the nightstand. Investigators knew if they didn't catch him off guard, he might try to flee or worse. Small teams surrounded the lodge just before dawn. They cut the power, silencing the cameras, and approached silently through the mist inside. Alex was at the kitchen table, surrounded by scattered documents and an open laptop. He looked gaunt, a shadow of the man who had once charmed courtrooms and boardrooms alike. The knock on the door was firm but calm. Alex Murda, this is the state police. Step outside with your hands visible for a few seconds. There was only silence, then the sound of a chair scraping. Slow footsteps. The door opened. Alex stood there in a rumpled shirt, his hair unkempt, eyes bloodshot. He didn't resist his hands, fingers trembling slightly. Do you know why we're here? An officer asked. Alex gave a faint smile that didn't reach his eyes. I suppose the house of cards finally collapsed, he said quietly. They placed him in handcuffs and read him his rights. As he was led to the waiting car, investigators swept through the lodge. What they found confirmed their suspicions. Burner phones, cash bundled in rubber bands, a passport tucked into a duffel bag, and encrypted drives hidden under loose floorboards. He had been preparing to run. News of his arrest spread like wildfire. Former allies scrambled to cut ties, while victims and their families gathered outside the courthouse, holding signs demanding justice. For many, it wasn't just about money anymore. It was about the years of deception, the betrayal of trust, the lives shattered. In the interrogation room later that day, Alex sat silently as the charges were read out: fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and more. The list seemed endless, yet, through it all, he barely reacted, only occasionally glancing up with that same cold, detached expression, as though watching someone else's life unravel. When the judgment finally came, The courtroom was silent. The presiding judge spoke at length about the horror and prolonged cruelty revealed in the surveillance footage, the 35 days of torture, the starvation, the humiliation, and the cold, methodical violence that led to Pong Naden's death. He acknowledged the psychiatric reports that diagnosed Guthrie with obsessive-compulsive personality disorder and postpartum depression, but he firmly stated that these conditions did not absolve her of responsibility. The judge emphasized that despite her mental disorders, Guthrie had been able to plan, control, and conceal her actions. She had even attempted to destroy evidence by dismantling the cameras, proving she understood the criminal nature of what she had done. This deliberate cover-up showed clear awareness and intent. Her mother, who had also participated in the abuse, received a separate sentence, while the mother's role was secondary and mostly followed her daughter's lead. The court still found her guilty of aiding and abetting acts of abuse. Ultimately, on June 22, 2021, the court delivered its verdict. Guthrie was convicted of manslaughter and 27 counts of abuse. She was sentenced to life imprisonment. Because Singapore law exempts women from caning, she would not be caned. But the judge stressed that life imprisonment was the only fitting punishment. Her mother was sentenced to 30 years in prison for her role in the sustained abuse. Kevin, the husband, was separately charged and later convicted of perjury and evidence tampering. For lying about removing the cameras and attempting to conceal the footage, he was sentenced to 5 years in prison. The footage, once meant to control and intimidate, became the very thing that spoke for Pong after her death, documenting every moment of her suffering and ensuring her abusers could not escape justice. Fearing a life sentence, Guthrie made one last desperate move. She dismissed her previous lawyer, hired a new defense attorney, and tried to renegotiate with the prosecution. The hope was to have her charge reduced from first-degree manslaughter to second-degree manslaughter, something that could cut her sentence down to around 15 years. When the trial resumed on June 22nd, her new lawyer argued boldly for a sentence of only 8 to 9 years, claiming that the domestic worker, Pong Naden, had contributed to Guthrie's declining mental state. He also pointed out that 4 previous domestic workers had allegedly never been abused. The prosecution, however, stood firm, insisting on the harshest possible penalty. After hearing both sides, the judge delivered the final verdict. Guthrie Moran was sentenced to 30 years in prison. The court called the case beyond words, marked by extreme brutality, and stated that a lenient sentence was unthinkable. The only reason the sentence was not life imprisonment, the judge noted, was the acknowledgement of her diagnosed mental illnesses. Without that factor, he said, he would have had no hesitation in imposing life behind bars. Guthrie repeatedly tried to appeal, seeking any way to shorten her sentence, but every appeal was rejected. The appellate judges concluded she had shown no remorse for killing Pong Naden. Her only focus after arrest was on reducing her punishment. As for Prema S. Narain Sami, she faced 50 charges but was later diagnosed with bipolar disorder. Her trial began on January 9, 2023. The prosecution sought 14 to 16 years, while her defense cited her illness and personal hardships to plead for leniency. Ultimately, the court ruled that her cruelty could not be excused and sentenced her to 14 years in prison. It also emerged that Prema had asked Kevin to remove the cameras and hide the hard drive, hoping to destroy evidence. Kevin secretly handed the hard drive to a friend, who later gave it to police, exposing the truth for her role in this cover-up. 3 more years were added to her sentence, bringing it to 17 years in total. Kevin Chellam, though he never physically harmed Pong on record, was often present during her abuse and did nothing to stop it. Guthrie even claimed Kevin had struck Pong, though Prema's account conflicted with this. Kevin was charged with perjury, evidence tampering, and causing grievous hurt. His trial remains unresolved to this day. When news of the case broke, it sent shockwaves across Singapore, outraged by the cruelty inflicted on Pong Naden. A local humanitarian organization launched a fundraising campaign in just 6 days. They raised over $100,000, which was sent to Pong's grieving family. Her family was devastated. Her sister told reporters that Pong had gone to Singapore to earn money for her son and give him a better life, yet barely a year later, she was gone. Her brother traveled to Singapore to bring her body home in her memory. The family placed a small cross outside their house, a quiet tribute to a life cut short. Pong left for Singapore with dreams of a brighter future, never imagining the home she entered would hide monsters in disguise. Her obedience and endurance only emboldened them, until it cost her everything: her freedom, her hope, and finally, her life. And so, as the rain falls softly and night deepens around us, thank you for joining me here at Crime Whispers. True crime stories remind us of the darkness that sometimes lurks behind familiar walls, and of the importance of staying vigilant, even as we seek comfort in the quiet of the night. If you found tonight's story compelling, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Let the rain carry you gently to sleep. And until we meet again, stay safe, stay curious, and let the night watch over you.